Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. Today's discussion is focused on driving value with agentic AI systems. This is a topic that is pretty much on many leaders' minds. Many companies are experimenting with AI, they're building agentic AI systems, but few are still getting that sweet spot as to can we make actually can the system generate value. So today I bring this panel to you from AI Future Leaders. We have got Andrea, Dr. Andrea Ruotolo. Welcome. Andrea is a senior global AI operations and governance leader. And also, you're now the president for Canada. Wow. At the Global Council for Responsible AI. Thank you for joining us. Very impressive. You worked at multiple Fortune 500 companies, leading AI, automation, and digital transformation. We're excited to have you here. Welcome. Welcome, Andrea.
Thank you for having me.
We also have got Satish Shenoy, a global vice president, technology, generative AI, and go-to-market for Gen AI at the SS&C Blue Prism. Amazing. I saw your company at the conference. Very good. I met you actually there. Satish is a partner. He partners and builds ecosystems, works with many companies, many stakeholders over 25 years. Wow, combining strategic vision. And I know you're a marathon runner as well.
Yes. Yes, Alina, thank you. Thank you for the welcome. I'm glad to be part of this.
Very, very impressive. We also have got an expert here who is a senior member. Vipin Kataria is an IEEE senior member and distinguished fellow, over 21 years of experience, cloud platform, machine learning, AI systems. You are working as a senior lead architect for data, machine learning, AI at Picaro. And you actually design these systems in real life. And you work with lots of data, lots of systems. So welcome to the panel. And to kick us off, I want to start by asking the question. So before we get going, let's define a bit what is Gen AI in practical terms and what makes it fundamentally different from traditional automation.
Yes.
Yeah,
I will be happy to jump in. And one thing that I wanted to clarify is that I'm going to take the perspective of a CEO because they ultimately have the responsibility. They need to take on the risk of making these decisions. And what the CEO is hearing right now is that agentic AI is inevitable. The teams are excited. The board is curious and a bit cautious. Some of them are. Then investors want growth. They don't want science projects. And as I mentioned before, the CEO is accountable for outcomes, for risk, and for reputation. So the real question is not today whether agentic AI is powerful. The question is, can it be governed? Can it be scaled and trusted to move the business without blowing up operational risk? So that's the lens that I would like to use today from my perspective, because I know they need help. And you asked about how do we define agentic AI? This is not traditional automation. This is not a chatbot. Agentic AI systems, they interpret objects and they plan multi-step actions and they execute across enterprise systems with limited human intervention. I think that's a bit of a challenge that we have right now. So basically, agentic AI changes the operating model. That's why I think it's so important that we have this discussion today.
Perfect. And I'll just jump in, Alina. Thank you, Andrea. You mentioned generative AI, but I think you also wanted to talk about agentic AI, right, Alina? So with that, to me, agentic AI goes, beyond, just to distinguish between generative and agentic. Agentic obviously goes beyond generating insights and hence generative. I'll take the view of the technologist. Since Andrea said CEO, I'll take a slightly different view. To me, in terms of definitions, agentic AI, is where it plans, decides, and works towards a specific goal using, tools and policies and context with some accountability built in. What makes it different from traditional automation, I think, is the agency. The word agency to me is what distinguishes it from other forms of automation or even other forms of AI. For example, it can decide what to do next, not just execute a predefined step. It can reason and work across systems, not just execute tasks. And then it is, as I think Andre was talking about, it is observable, it is governable, it's explainable, right? So the reason we know a little bit about this is because at SS&C Blue Prism, we actually coined the original traditional, what is known as RPA, traditional automation, robotic process automation, was coined by us about 22 years ago, and it became an industry after that, right? So with other players coming in. But we always had digital workers. So when somebody says AI agents and says almost acts like it's a new thing, it surprises me because we have had software robots and digital workers for a long time. The thing that's different is instead of simply following instructions and be trained to do specific tasks, these can be a lot more. AI agents can be autonomous. So what we have done at SS&C Blue Prism is to build on the foundation of traditional automation because it's more deterministic, and then be able to control, probabilistic technology like agentic AI. And the combination, I think, works really well to meet the goals of most enterprises. So with that, Vipin, feel free.
Yeah, just piggyback on you. So I feel, the traditional, automation I feel is like a vending machine, right? You press button B3 and you get chips, right? Let's say it's every time it's the same input, same output, same repeatability. But an agent, right? It's like a personal assistant. If you say I'm hungry, right, and it will figure it out what you might want, check your basically dietary preference, maybe your budget, and then order something. Same goal, but completely different level of thinking. And that's I feel, the traditional versus this agentic AI. I call it a little bit conscious agents, but yeah, we'll be there.
I actually like that, Vipin.
Yeah,
It's
Vending
good.
machine versus figuring out what when you're hungry. I like that.
that is an excellent, I think, analogy. I do meet with lots of leaders, and they keep asking, how is it different from RPA or automation? And isn't it the same thing? So this is actually a very good analogy. Now, from hype to reality, where are leaders most often misunderstanding
Yeah, so
this
I'll start.
AI,
Um,
agentic AI today?
Yeah, so I'll start. The core misunderstanding that I see, because we have actually deployed over 4,000 automation agents, we call them, because they're a mixture of traditional automation and all the way to autonomous AI agents, right? So we are very familiar with this idea, right, of there being hype with some things, and then there's reality. So to me, a lot of leaders I see think of agentic AI as a almost like a technology upgrade, automation 2.0. But it is actually, in reality, it's a operating model shift. It's moving from, I would say, moving from deterministic control which is what traditional automation was, to governed autonomy, right? So, common mistakes are treating agents like chatbots, for example, to bring in an analogy. Using agents without thinking about governance or guardrails, right? Because we have to think about this operating model instead of a unit, worker, if you will, a digital worker. So you can't script every decision, as you know, but we can absolutely architect the guardrails, the audit trails, the quality controls, all of that. That's at SS&C, we have moved from asking, can we control every step, to can we explain and defend every outcome that the AI agent is able to do. That's the shift, I think, from experimentation to value creation. So that's how I see it, Lena.
Yeah, I'll paint a different color, Yeah, I think, the biggest, I think, misconception I've seen leaders is we're still living or thinking in a paradigm where we're thinking, oh, it's like a plug and play kind of software, right? It's kind of software where you install, boom, and everything is automated. But it's not this how AI agent works, right? So basically, let's say the leaders are expecting deployment like a cloud software. You sign up, you configure, you go to live. But the reality, it's more like hiring a new employee. Think about it. When you hire someone, you just don't give up a laptop and say, figure it out. You give them some clear roles, responsibility. You train them, you set some feedback loops, you manage their performance. And same thing with agents. So I feel the mentorship, what's being required, right, is stop kind of thinking about it's like a software implementation, right, and start thinking more like a workforce augmentation, right. So you need to basically invest time in training these agents, giving them the right context, what you mentioned, and they are like, and the right guardrails, and basically continuously improving it based on those feedback. So the bottom line, this shift is more, in which my leader is, telling is what this can do, right, from agentic, right, to asking how do we work with this, right, and that's where you go from kind of experimentation to kind of actual value creation.
I love that you use these terms of guardrails and also empowerment of the current employees that you have. So an expansion of or an augmentation of their current capabilities. When I speak with leaders, the majority share the same concern. They say something like, "This sounds powerful, but it also sounds dangerous." Right? Because they have these new employees, but there's so much uncertainty about what they can do. And we've seen all these news around AI agents replicating themselves for survival. And no one was expecting that. So I think the skepticism is justified. I recently saw this news from Gartner that they are predicting that 40% or over 40% of agentic AI projects will be canceled by 2027. They have concerns about the guardrails, and it's because organizations are failing to connect autonomy to measurable business value and governance discipline. So I think that's an area where we can support leaders. And I think we need to change the question from what can the agent do and start asking, what business outcome am I willing to let this system own and under what constraints? Because at the end of the day, I believe that agentic AI is not an innovation bet. What we are doing is we are delegating decision-making power to a system that sometimes we don't truly understand what it does or what it
And
does.
that's actually very valuable. And often it's the use cases and the clarity around the use cases. And I do agree with this. many companies are either not going after the right use cases, or they are failing to measure the right KPIs to figure out, is this agentic AI system actually driving that value? Which brings me to the question, what are the strongest signals and business process? How can we tell what's a good candidate for agentic AI? Where should you actually put in those agentic AI systems? Like you said, we now have potentially new AI employees. So where do we put those agentic AI systems rather than simple automation or more classic type of analytics?
Yeah, maybe I can start with. Uh, so I think here is a simple test, right? Basically, we can ask ourselves, right? Does this task need thinking or is just doing? And when it says just doing, it's like, you're copying data from one system to another, some kind of scheduling emails, basic calculation. I mean, that's an automation, like, just keep it simple. But if we need thinking, and that's where these agents come in, right? And when I say thinking, it's more about, think like, it need to understand context, like the whether the customer is happy, upset, confused, different approaches needed. And now, given a context, does it need to make some judgment call? Like, should I escalate it? Should I make a refund? Should I wait for it? Should I offer a discount? Right? That's where your judgment call. And the last, which is very, very critical, and that's my favorite, is, oh, you have the context, you can, decide, but definitely you need to pull a lot of information around different data modalities, different system, so that you can contextualize this information to bring actually the timely, the trusted, and actionable business insight. And that's where I'm building all the system. So I feel, it's more about, giving them the smart in turn, would this be just judgment, or, if just agent, if no, just pure automation?
I would, I have a simpler kind of viewpoint on this, Alina. I think in terms of three signals, right? Or three ways to think about this, right? So first is decisions. Second is context or knowledge. And third is speed, right? So if a process is purely deterministic and you need speed and determinism, right? So think of something like high frequency trading. I work for a very large financial services company, and or something like assembly line automation, like Tesla is doing, for example, um, or simple data entry. So the speed, and it is deterministic, no reasoning. Use traditional automation, right? For also, if you're using semi-structured or structured data, use traditional OCR IDP, right? But if it needs reasoning, it needs context, it needs, latency is okay. So speed is not an issue. It could be a candidate for agentic AI. So just to expand on that, right? When there's, let's take the first one, decisions. When there's multiple judgment calls, when there are exceptions, when there are trade-offs to be made, not simply following certain rules, then that's a good candidate, number one. Second is context, right, is important, where it needs, this thing needs um, various documents, various systems, various policies. It needs to engage with people, right? That's the context part, right? That's the second decision point. And third is latency or speed. If you can tolerate, 2 to 5 seconds for a in-depth response, then, an agent is better versus a simple automation, right? So again, back to the three signals I look at: decisions, context, and speed.
Those are great. And I'm going to add maybe just a bit more content and use a slightly different language. But I would say if the process is linear and predictable, automated. And now, if the process requires interpretation, prioritization, and adaptation, I believe that's where agentic AI earns a seat at the table. Now, we talked a little bit about latency. you can have edge agentic AI versus centralized agentic AI. So that's where we have another option to consider. We may have the ability to have extra latency at the edge, but not enough latency acceptable to have a centralized agentic AI to operate that process. So very interesting opportunities to decide what would be the best option to automate the process.
We also got a question from the audience. Actually, we have a couple questions. One question is around single agent or multi-agent systems and orchestration. I think there are a few problematic things that could happen in production because these systems are probabilistic, not deterministic, and the more agents you have got, the more complexity, then governance becomes much more challenging. Orchestration becomes much more challenging. Well, what are your thoughts? If anyone wants to jump on this one.
I think there's, I think while fully automated agents are still not quite the reality, especially in production. I mean, experimentation is okay. The way we look at AI in SS&C is, AI is going to be imperfect, right, or probabilistic, like you said. Instead of saying, will AI do something wrong? What we say is when AI does something wrong, what are the operational mitigations we have put in place to deal with it, right? To the point that the person made in the chat, I think there are four non-negotiable kind of elements in a framework to make this agentic thing work. First is how decisions are made. Why did the agent act in the way it did? This has to be architected from day one. Second is real-time kind of tracking and quality scoring. So we continuously monitor for things like hallucination risk, policy compliance, and bias, right? So set up alerts before things go wrong. Third is guardrails. What rules were applied? How are we constraining any exceptions that the agents get into? So you track that. And fourth is audit trails, right? Every decision that the agent made is logged with inputs, with the reasoning it used, the confidence scores, and the outputs. So I think using a framework, you actually make this agentic system work safely, securely, and at scale. So I think that's the beginning of how we can kind of ultimately get to the point where it'll work more smoothly and more reliably and consistently. Hopefully that helps.
There was another question for Andrea. In the beginning, when you were defining AI agents, you mentioned with limited human intervention. That brings us a bit on this. When do we put that human in the loop? How do we know what needs to be for AI agents and what needs to be for that human in the loop? And how do we govern these systems?
Yes, that's a great question. I don't know if I actually said with limited human intervention because I think differently in that regard. I do believe that we need to keep humans in the loop for multiple reasons. First of all, because we want to de-risk what these AI agents are doing. And I do believe that we can get to a point where these multi-agent processes or teams will seem to be operating very well. And that might give us the confidence that we can now leave them alone to do what they are doing. But the truth is that we don't know what they are going to start doing when we don't look anymore. That's why I think it's critical that humans remain in the loop. That's one of the reasons. And the other reason is because we want to evolve as well. Humans want to learn. One of the studies from MIT recently showed that humans that are using AI without much brain engagement in the process are losing their cognitive capacity. That's a very dangerous thing to do to humanity, to society. That's why I think, and it has been proven over and over again, that when we work on the power of bringing together technology and humans, we achieve better results. So I would encourage everyone to actually work and support this approach of training humans in the process to de-risk what this technology is going to do and to empower humans to learn as fast as possible to be able to monitor and bring more value to the technology deployment for the betterment of society.
And just to from my side is, I think better involve this human in loop concept during the initial part of your build this agentic AI solution, rather than, oh, I deploy it and then now you put this human in loop.
I totally agree with that. Yes.
Yeah, I've seen those mistakes very closely.
Yes, unfortunately, we know, right?
Yeah.
Another concern that actually Vipin came and discussed was you actually do a talk on build versus buy.
Yeah.
Many companies are jumping at agentic AI systems, but they have a concern. When is it that you buy? When do you build something in-house? Not everybody has got the capacity. And sometimes you actually said something very interesting. Sometimes you just need to wait
Yeah.
for some of these systems to become, I guess, better. So,
Yeah.
yeah, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, it's same. I think a lot of time, we just spend on discussing even in this boardroom, even, at architecture level, oh, should I buy this or should I build this agentic AI solution? And but we never thought of, okay, should we wait for it? Should we let the, maybe the solutions get matured or the vendor get matured? And coming on the build versus buy, a lot of time depend upon the business and the company context, right? Take an example of what we call as the data readiness. Is your company has a right contextualized data which has a right business insight to build this system? And if you're not, then maybe buy it rather than build it. Or it could be, if data is actually, or if whatever you're building is actually your differentiating factor, like Anthropic. Oh, they are building AI agent, which is a completely differentiating factor for them. Then there is no other choice, right? And the third is my favorite, where is the governance comes into play. And what it means is, take about a healthcare industry or a fintech industry, right? Where you deploy an autonomous agent and it, kind of deny a loan or something like that, right? There a lot of explainability need to be needed. Where, maybe in e-commerce industry, where, maybe an agent which makes a mistake in, kind of doing a refund, that's still acceptable. So I think there are industries where you don't have a choice, the fintech, pharmaceutical, where you need to just buy it. There is no option of, sorry, build it, no, not buy it.
Yeah. No, actually, I would add to your point about highly regulated industries because you know SS&C operates in two of the most highly regulated industries, financial services and healthcare. There cannot be more stringent requirements, right? And we have deployed 4,000 agents at this point at scale, safely and securely, and we are able to actually see tremendous benefit from that. Now, let me give you a quick example, right? About 3 years ago, when we tried to implement governance with each of the use cases, we went to the market and said, is there a tool? Because we couldn't put things into production without having the right governance and guardrails, given it's a highly regulated environment. So, because no vendor could meet our explainability, our auditing, all those requirements, and from a regulatory standpoint, we decided to build our own AI gateway, right? But then, so that's the build example. But then we looked at models and we said, okay, do we need to create our own model? Probably not. You know why? Because all of the third party models Claude, GPT, Llama, all these, there's no differentiation. Models to an extent are, commodity in a lot of ways. There are 5,000 plus models and maybe more. There's no point in have building a model from scratch. That's an expensive proposition. Maybe we can, use the data we have on our customers, etc., anonymize it and use it with our models. But there's no point in building a model from scratch. Is what we decided, and so we just used Llama 3 as our starting point, and then used the context for our clients, and did things like RAG to actually make those models and tune them, train those models to an extent, because we also didn't want to fork away from the traditional the models out of the box, right? So to me, you build, and I think I extend what Vipin is saying. You build when your competitive advantage depends on what you're building. In this case, we built the governance and gateway platform, which a lot of our customers now want. You're operating in a highly specialized domain, so highly regulated industry is a good example. You have the infrastructure, you have the capability to own the full life cycle, then you build. If you buy when the use case is common, or speed to market matters more than customization. Like, if you want to create a model from scratch, why would you do that? That'll take years. Speed to market is important, so that rather than customization, you lack the technical depth, maybe, then you would also buy, right? So that's what I would say.
I totally agree with what you both said, and with your latest points on whatever is business critical is your unique sauce that you bring to the market. Yes, build it in-house. Now, in terms of buying other commoditized models, my suggestion would be do not rely on just one of them, but constantly be operating your systems, looking at what's the best answer provided by all the key models that are out there. I'm seeing that now that's a new trend, and I think it makes sense because if you lock in with one particular model, you might be falling behind.
And Alina, before I'll just jump in and say one more thing. It's not just about build and buy. It's also about partner. I mean,
Yes.
having managed partner ecosystems, I would be remiss if I didn't bring that up, right? Because sometimes, and especially in a world where AI is moving so fast, you can't build or even buy everything that you want to serve your clients, right? You can partner as a third, path, if you will. So we do that. We look at what's out there, and we possibly also partner because we don't have to build it, we don't have to buy it, but we could partner.
That makes sense. And the ecosystem is becoming very complex. We have got now MCP because your agents need access to tools, and there are many companies that are offering. Not everyone is doing it in the most secure and safe way. Your agentic systems may need that human in the loop, and humans don't always, they can't always provide those guardrails. And in some situations, you cannot physically put that human in the loop. There are systems where you have got agents taking thousands of actions. You cannot physically put that human in the loop, which becomes a concern. But this whole let's go after speed. Many CEOs, and Andrea, you're playing the CEO today on the panel. Many are running after that speed, and the discussion around guardrails is very important. What governance mechanisms are essential when deploying these autonomous systems, and how do we regulate them in those very high risk and those regulated environments? And Satish mentioned banks and healthcare.
Yes, can I jump in on this one? I would say no reasonable CEO wants uncontrolled autonomy. They may think they want autonomy, but not uncontrolled autonomy. What I'm seeing is that the winning model, the one that's emerging is constrained autonomy, where agents operate within clearly defined authority boundaries. Today we talked about guardrails. Humans approve high impact or irreversible decisions, right? Alina, to your point, we can't be everywhere all the time, or in many cases, we can't make decisions fast enough. But for high impact or irreversible decisions, that is critical to keep a human to approve. And when I talk about constrained autonomy, is every action, and this was mentioned before, is logged, is explainable and auditable. So I was looking at data because I work with a lot of companies, but globally, and current data is showing that over 70% of agent decisions still include human validation, particularly in those domains that are regulated or high risk domains. This is not about replacing judgment. I believe it's about scaling judgment. Um, so those are my thoughts from a CEO perspective.
Yeah, yeah, just to putting more from a technical standpoint, and which is like while building this autonomous and called semi-autonomous agent, right? When I basically build this architecture, I call more like a AAA framework. It's not like a regular AAA. So, and this need to be baked on day one when you start thinking to, have this architecture. The first is called authorization, right? Basically, who has access to what, right? It's like moving from role-based access to your context-based access, because eventually agent need context, right? And they could be in the context, most of the time it rely on your embedding. So should this agent have full permission or restricted? Can it act during your kind of business hour but need approval after midnight? So we need to define those boundaries very clearly, right? And the second part, I think, which Satish and Andre covered, is accountability, right? When something gets wrong, who is responsible? If an agent makes a bad decision and someone sues, right? Who's liable? And my rule is simple, the human to deploy the agents, kind of owns the outcome, but this need to be very clear, documented, well was communicated, like ownership basically upfront, right?
Yeah.
And the last one is very critical, and which is I think I believe UNIS 2026 would be is all about auditability. People are telling 2026 year was agentic, and now the people are looking for ROI, and thousands of agent some of agents get deployed, and there will come the auditability. And what it means is, can you prove what happened and why? Every decision needs some kind of full audit trail, a lineage, right? Which data, which rule, why this choice, right? And at a board level and executive level, they want to understand if something is deployed, it took actions, and they can clearly explain that action, which comes to explainability. So I feel these three AAA around authorization, accountability, and auditability, we need to be baked in.
I'll just add just quickly, Alina, I know we're running out of time. So I'll say in regulated environments, just to kind of round off what Andrea and Vipin said, in regulated environments, and somebody mentioned healthcare in the chat, explainability is not optional, right? It's the price of admission. So that's number one. If you can't explain an agent's decision, you shouldn't deploy it. That's the rule we follow. That's number two. And third, Andrea said something about this. Governance isn't friction, it's what makes scaling possible. That's how we have scaled to 4,000 plus agents because we have the right governance in place, right? So those three things I would kind of, hearing Vipin and Andrea, I'm summing it up for the audience, so it's helpful, especially for regulated environments.
I actually myself work in a regulated environment, and we had a question around what it looks like for organizations to come together cross-functionally. Dev, support, architecture, design, there's many departments involved. So how do you succeed with putting together a successful, sustainable agentic solution when you have got so many players at the table?
I think there is at least, let me start. I think first of all, this should be clear, from the top. The edict really should come from the top, because otherwise, people will be not clear about what's going to happen. There's no clear vision and all that, right? So that's number one. Second, that we have seen that works really well is an operating model. What kind of operating model do you want to use to make it successful? And then third is having a measure of what's happening, right? A scorecard, right? As to how are we measuring success? You know, is it is it in the jobs we displace, or how do we really measure success, right? In our case, we deployed all these agents, but we saw little to no job loss because we built more capacity to drive additional revenue while delivering cost savings, right? So one of the most important aspects, then fourth, is the human agent, collaboration, or how do they work together? What's the impact on culture? What's, on the organization culture, right? So we designed a three-tier kind of model when it comes to human agent collaboration, right? The lowest tier is basically human-led with agent assistance. So high stakes decisions, right? Loan approvals, legal interpretations, all those kinds of things. Humans decide, agents provide analysis and documentation. That's the lowest. The next tier is human in the loop for especially irreversible decisions, right? This is medium risk decisions such as compliance exceptions and so on. Third is the highest autonomy, where it's low risk, high volume tasks, email routing, data extraction, right? Things like that, where agents can operate independently and you can still put some auditing. So to us, the biggest challenge was how do humans work in this new world? Beyond what I already said, right? The vision, the operating model, the scorecard. It's the cultural change, and how do you work humans and agents together?
Those are great points, and I will add to that. I wanted to share a heart emoji while you were talking about the connection on the human and technology working together to empower humans. One of the things I think it's absolutely critical is to have, and Alina, we had this conversation on the phone today. We need a human that takes on the end-to-end implementation of a particular AI solution. Today, that doesn't exist. Normally, it breaks down along the process of being implemented, and you have noticed, and we have noticed that that doesn't work. And so normally you have a person volunteering their time to make sure that those gaps are closed, but it needs to become official. We need people to be responsible of the end-to-end implementation, and that they understand not only the technology, but as Satish, you were mentioning, the change management component of implementing this technology. Otherwise, what you're going to have in your organization is pushback. You're going to have people not integrating the technology, and that's going to delay your modernization, and probably that's going to impact your market value. That's why you want people that not only understand the technology and business implications, but also know how to handle change management.
Very well said.
Now
Yeah,
that we are coming to an end of the panel, and we have got more questions actually. But I just want to close today by asking everyone, looking ahead for 2026, if you could just say one thing to leaders for the next year when it comes to agentic AI and driving value, what is it that leaders should be preparing for and planning for 2026?
Okay, I will jump in. Just one thing, it can be a phrase.
Sure, go ahead. Yes.
Leadership is about taking a long-term view on the impact your decisions are going to have. So I'm hoping to see more leaders that take a humble approach in recognizing their the uncertainties, what they don't know, and that they work more on partnerships and that they collaborate more with their employees in making the decisions about the future of their organization. Sorry, that wasn't short.
That's perfect.
Yeah. Yeah, I think for me, it's all about basically the data governance, around, what I call as the AAA framework. I think eventually 2026 would be the key part around it, around data governance, or I'll call agent governance. Yeah.
I think you're muted, Satish.
Yeah. So Alina, this is something that's I've been thinking about, right? It's if you look at what's happening with some of the agentic as we move forward, I would sum it up like this: in 2026 and beyond, what leaders must plan for is a world where the hardest problem isn't making AI act autonomously, it's deciding who's accountable when it does, right? That's how I would sum it up. That's going to be the hardest problem, right, going forward.
I want to thank everyone for joining us. I also want to invite you to check out our YouTube channel. We have got courses coming up on vibe coding in February and building agentic AI no-code bootcamp. This is actually a repeat. We have been running this bootcamp quite successfully, and we are bringing it back. Do join us, check us out. We are also sharing our newsletter, and I would like to thank our speakers for this evening. Satish from SS&C Blue Prism, amazing work you guys are doing there. Bipin, thank you for joining us. And Andrea, thank you for sharing great insights.
Thank you for organizing this, Alina. We enjoyed it, at least. I know I enjoyed it very much. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you
Same
so
here.
much, Alina,
Thanks.
and the AI Future Leaders team and everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.